Welcome to the Duality Way podcast, where we discuss all things health and wellness related from a professional perspective, understanding the dualistic nature of life.
Today we'll be discussing Corporate Wellness Rewired, the triple play of movement, mindset, and meals. So I love this topic because, we, especially in our coaching, we specifically focus on habits that create well-rounded individuals. Because the reality is, as much as we talk to the dualistic nature of life, the discussion around that is mostly surrounding, there's always two parts to the play, right? Yes, there's a good side, yes, there's a bad side, you need to be aware of both. But on top of that, when it comes to the human body, you need to be aware of the physical aspect of your musculature and your bone density and everything like that. You need to be aware of your brain and how that plays a factor. And then you need to be aware of your gut and your organs and how that plays a factor. And if any one of those three is out of whack, I can guarantee you now the other two are going to go out of whack as well. Which is why we speak to it so often and so frequently with such intensity. It's really the most important trio that you can ever focus on is how movement plays a role on your physical body, on how your mindset plays a role on your brain and your productivity, and then lastly how what you eat and what you put in your body affects how you feel. And when we speak to how you feel, it's also quite it's a double play, because it affects how your body physically feels, but it also affects how you feel mentally and emotionally, because especially like people who eat through their emotions, they tend to feel guilt or like suffering after they've eaten too much or they've binge eaten. And so the triple play really plays such a huge role, because the movement makes you feel better about yourself, and that thing improves your mindset. And then when you improve our mindsets, we typically want to work on ourselves, so we eat better as well. And everything grows.
One thing that I can relate to specifically about this is entrepreneurship is a very difficult journey. And it can play on your mind a lot, especially when things just are not making sense and not going well, even no matter what you plan, no matter what you strategize, no matter what you execute, it just feels at some point like nothing is actually working. And it's very easy to feel hopeless and let that get to you and affect your mind like terribly. But I find that because I have been a lot more consistent with my workouts, it helps to alleviate those effects. Not to say that you don't feel sad or it doesn't get to you on some level, but at least I'm able to sleep. At least I am able to actually go about my day and be productive. Studies have shown consistently that when you exercise consistently, that it almost, I don't want to say rewires your brain, because then I'm going to sound like a BuzzFeed article, but essentially what it does is it helps to create more resilience, so that when things do go wrong, you are able to cope with them. And so for me, that's the movement aspect covered, and like you said, how that one thing has a knock-on effect to the others. So that's one thing that I can personally relate to, and how I feel a lot has changed since I've been very consistent with my training. I went through a gap in my training at some point, and that really affected my mental health. But since I found that intrinsic motivation to keep going and keep doing it, everything else has improved.
Yeah, and I think I'll chat to the mindset part of it. I think when your body's physically strong, it feels easier to go at difficult tasks.
I can handle this.
Because you can handle this, right? I think for me, it was one of the biggest things when I started to weightlift especially, and I started getting really strong, is kind of like, and it's funny because there was a conversation I had with a gentleman who at that time I kind of thought was a bit of he's just an old man, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he always said, he was like, listen, if you've lifted 200 solid ass kilos, the rest of your day is easy. Who cares, And at that time I was kind of like, it's not that simple. But at the same time, it kind of does play into that. Your comparison changes. And I think that helps a lot when it comes to looking at tasks, because you have more self-belief. It's not necessarily that the task actually is easier or whatever, but you do believe in yourself more when you look after yourself. When you do things that are hard, on a daily, not daily, but a frequent basis. And it does change the mindset quite severely.
Yeah, because you've challenged yourself to a degree where you're like, man, I lifted 200 kilos this morning. What is this email going to do to me? What is this meeting going to do to me? So it's a big change to your psyche. And I think that, like, in terms of how this works in corporate, it's very important to note that these things need to be easily accessible by your staff and by employees.
And by your executives.
Executives definitely need this. So I think, I keep going back to a lot of studies, but I think what's important is, one thing that has come out quite recently is that consistent exercise throughout the day at low intensity bears better results for your mindset, for your body, for your health, than dedicating a single hour a day to your exercise or to your health. And that's not to say that you need to spend the entire day moving and being in activity at all times. It's to say that maybe you need to do a 5-minute stretch now and then. Maybe you need to go for a walking meeting of 10 to 15 minutes. And those things need to be available and accessible to employees. And that is going to have a huge and dramatic effect on absenteeism, on productivity, on interpersonal relationships at work. Because you're actually getting out of the office, getting into a different environment. And you're doing something with your peers that is not specifically for work, but for a different goal. And that goal is to foster your health, to cultivate a better work environment, to get to know one another. It's so important to take those breaks, because when you see someone from one perspective constantly, it's so easy to dehumanize them. And as we know, when you take the human out of wellness, there is no more wellness. Martz and I are big supporters of, you cannot take the human out of wellness. And that's to say that you cannot have an AI bot as a therapist. You cannot join a class online and online only and do that. I don't feel that being fully and entirely remote as well is very good for you. I think that you need to have some sort of social interaction. We're human. We are social creatures. If you start to divide us and remove us from each other and remove the human aspect out of your work, then everything else will start to break down. That's when you start, we saw it in COVID. We saw it with the, what did they call it? The Great Resignation or something like that.
Oh yes,
where essentially so many people were resigning because they felt so disconnected from their peers at work, from life in general, because they've been sitting behind screens the whole time. The only way that we could access the outside world was through a screen. And I still think we're experiencing some of those long-term effects. People built new habits around that. 100%. And I think it's not a good thing.
Just to your point about the human aspect, it reminds me of our session that we had with the humans team here. And
Humans is a company, by the way.
So it's with the Z. And one of the things that we mentioned was the fact that we always notice whenever you take people outside of the office and you take them to a human perspective, we always see the interns start to speak up more, and we always notice towards the start of the facilitation, the interns tend to kind of keep to themselves and they're not really answering much. And it's kind of like, I'm going to compare it to school, but you get your grade 8s and then you get your matrics, and typically the grade 8s are kind of just sitting in the back, or they're actually typically put in the front, but they're typically just sitting there quietly. And they don't really have much personality. And then the minute they go through this process of seeing the people around them as just people, they start to sort of interact differently. Not necessarily better all the time, but differently. And so I find that's one of the things where bringing people together for a common goal of looking after themselves, it's just going to change the culture of your space and create more positive environments for everyone. And it's not necessarily down to one aspect. It's down to everyone engaging with everything for themselves, but also for the greater good. And so to mention what you were saying about the, sorry, I'm just going to let that finish. What you were mentioning about, you can't take the human out of wellness. That's also why we've introduced the clinics that we've introduced, because we do have a remote thing that we offer to companies. However, it's not good enough. It's enough to get people through their day, but to keep people engaged and to keep people actually doing the thing, you need to physically be in their space and giving them a social benefit, not just the physical, well done, you've got this thing. It's also about actually engaging in the social proof of it all. We want to show off. That's what we want to do as people, even if it's in such a small way as, I showed up and I did my 1,000 steps a day, because for some people that's an achievement. And that's the other thing about the human in wellness. Everyone walks a different journey, and so the minute we try and make things purely remote, it seems as though there's a set step. There's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And the reality is, for some people, they're not starting on this step 1, they're starting on 10 steps back. And so it makes it more challenging to actually walk that journey with people when you don't see them and when you don't have those conversations, because it also, like you mentioned, removes the professional from the space. So what it does is it drives people to not want to reach out and not want to ask for advice and not want to discuss things with the people around them, because they feel either that they're alone or that they're ashamed of where they are, because they compare themselves to other people. And that talks to the mindset of it all. And the real shocker for me, not shocker really, but the real home driver for me on this one is the minute you give people an opportunity to improve themselves, they tend to try and improve the people around them, whether that be their family, whether that be their team members, whether that be whatever. And all that happens is everyone in that circle starts to grow.
It's about community.
100%, and it's about the iron sharpens iron. It's very difficult, and this is also why everyone always preaches it's got to come from the top down. It's actually about modeling, and so if you don't model the change, people don't. Michael Jackson mentioned, be the change you want to see. And the reason it works is, as humans, monkey see, monkey do. We want to continually do what we see people doing that is driving results. And so and this is where I'm going to say, from leadership perspective, implementing wellness within the leadership team that's accessible to the teams below. So this is the one thing that I've noticed. A lot of the times people try and, especially when it comes to these kinds of things, because they seem expensive, because there is a cost per person, and then the ROI is not obvious. There's no direct sales improvement that is trackable immediately. It takes time. But the compounding effect is the culture changes. The people being healthier, the presenteeism's dropping, the sales probably will improve because people are more productive. But from
and
a
more
leadership,
personable on the phone, or more personable when they're trying to sell something, they're actually enthusiastic about life,
or more resilient, where they're not going to be as insulted by someone being rude on the phone. Because a lot of call centers, I really, the angels. All call center angels are, they're just angels. Because you're dealing with people at their absolute worst. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be to hear no so many times when you are genuinely trying to offer value. And so what these things do is it doesn't matter, like we mentioned, if you lifted 200 kilos, who cares? It makes everything kind of fall into place, and it's just a lot easier to continue doing what you're doing. But then on top of that, it also creates culture of improvement. People want to drive results
Yes.
for themselves, but then that also drives through in their personality, through their work as well. And so when it comes from leadership, but is also something that is done with the teams below, it's so important. I was working on a transformation with with Oracle 2 years ago, in the agile space, and the one thing that I loved about it was they had such a great mix of people. They had interns, they had specialists, they even brought their consultants in, and what we got to see was, because there were so many different perspectives being discussed in the same room, you got to see the people just coming out of their shells. I always used to say day one was the hardest day, because you have to convince people to come out of their shells, come out of their shells, come out of their shells. But what I loved was at the end of the day, there was like a personal reflection that was really great, because it wasn't necessarily about what you'd learned, it was actually about what you learned about yourself. So it wasn't about like, oh, what did you learn about Agile today? It was about, what did you see yourself doing today that you don't usually do? And then what we saw was on day 2, all of a sudden people from the go were jumping in, asking questions, giving their answers, discussing things with their colleagues, and really just helping everyone around them to see things from their perspective. But not only that, people were more willing to listen. And I think that that's the other thing, is we oftentimes forget how frustrating it is to work with other people who have different ideas, because we want to drive home our perspective. And when we are more calm and less stressed, just in general, we tend to listen better. And so as a leader, it is your responsibility to ensure that people have those tools available to them, but that you're also implementing yourself. Because you are the easiest social proof to your teams. If you are not doing it, it's hard for us to convince the people below you to do it.
And just to kind of jump in there and also add to something that you said a couple of topics ago, we were talking about community, and you were mentioning about how breaking the ice essentially, and getting people to actually bring themselves to what they're doing, be it in the course that they're doing, or like you were saying, there's a workshop that they were participating in, and usually on day 1 people are not really participating, they're there, but they haven't figured out what they can and can't do yet. When you start to incorporate the thing about getting people to look after themselves but together, it starts to create a culture of, I'm looking out for you and you're looking out for me. And that is so important, because that is what drives creativity. That is what drives people to actually feel safe. And when people feel safe, then they give their best work. And they problem solve way better. They're able to innovate way better, because they don't feel like they're going to get their head bitten off if they make a mistake. They don't feel like, like they're unsafe to actually be themselves. And that to me is really, that is like the absolute gold standard. If you can achieve that in your workplace, then you know that your employees are going to be pouring themselves into their work for you, and that's what you want, because you want them on your side. You don't want them on the side of the paycheck, and that's it. So so that to me is the main thing about getting people to do this in a community.
And to speak to what you just mentioned now about the paycheck part of things, from a personal side of things, I am quite tired. My brain is not all here. So like, for instance, and I have discussed this before, I've had other businesses that were more successful. They made me more money, but it was unsustainable, and I lost my love for that thing because it was so much effort to go and do that thing. And so the other thing is, when people are looking after themselves, it takes less effort to do the things that they want to do and to do the work. Even if they're not necessarily in a function that they want to be in for the rest of their lives, they are still more at ease with themselves, and they're more easily able to pour themselves into something with the notion of self-improvement, and with the notion of, if I go through this process, I know that there's an end goal. If there's another position that I want to get to, I will work myself that way. Whereas what I find is, when people are not necessarily looking after themselves, everything is more urgent.
Yeah.
Everything is pressing, everything is stressed.
Yeah.
Everything is, I want this now, I want this now, I want this now. And the reality is, like, as business owners, we know that it's not always possible to deliver right now.
Yeah.
It's not always possible to give you a raise right now. It is possible for me to have an open and honest conversation with you about, listen, if you continue to deliver the way you have, I can give you that raise when the revenue shows, when the business grows in this way. And it just gives people that opportunity to have open conversations. But when people are emotionally driven and people are very high strung because they're stressed, it's very difficult to have those conversations because people are less understanding. People need things now. And you know, people are willing to wait if they see you putting the effort into them and growing them. Even if it's not from necessarily a wellness perspective, it can also be from a training perspective. We've seen with our kitchen, the minute we start pouring energy into them and saying, like, what do you think? How do you feel about this? What do you see? What do we need to sort of implement? It drives them to want to work.
Yeah. And I think that is a very good point to leave it on. Thank you for joining us on season 2, where we discussed our corporate wellness rewired. This is a conclusion now to that. Join us next time, where we're going to be talking about
pain-free foundations, where we're going to be discussing how you can set up different foundational habits that allow you to succeed without pain, for instance, injuries and illness. We will be going quite deep into intricate details of different types of habits, from fitness, eating, mentality, so that we can set you up for success in the long run.
Cool. See you guys next time.
Cheers, guys.